Hi guys, if you're new to my channel, my name is Stella, and if you're a returning subscriber, you're still so welcome.
So many reasons why you're wonderful, you my love.
So on today's video, I am going to be reviewing a much talked about movie in the Nigerian community, and this movie is called ANIKULAPO. ANIKULAPO simply means the one who was brought back to life, or so I think. Now, this movie is a Nigerian movie that was produced and directed by Kunle. Now, if you don't know who Kunle is, he's a Nigerian actor, a producer, and a director, right? Some of his works includes Citation, which featured Temi Otedola, that's Femi Otedola's daughter. He also worked on October 1st, Phone Swap, The Figurine, Swallow, A Naija Christmas, and a host of other wonderful movies, right? Now, back to ANIKULAPO. ANIKULAPO was released on Netflix on the 30th of September 2022, and it was shot in a real place, which is Oyo State in Nigeria, right? This movie featured the likes of Kunle Remi, who played Saro. We also had Bimbo Ademoye, who played Queen Arolake. Then we had Sobowale, who played Awanro. We had Hakim K. Kazim, I hope I pronounced that correctly, but we had Hakim K. Kazim, who played the Oba of Ojumo. We also had Mr. Macaroni and a host of other wonderful and lovely actors and actresses, right? So this is a story about a young man called Saro who left his hometown to another land, and he started having an affair with two different women, right? So this story basically is about a gigolo, a sugar mommy, mystical powers, the king's wife, and an entire community. This goes as far as telling us how far people would go and what people would do just to bring back their dead ones back to life, right? Now, before I start criticizing this movie, I would like to put it out there that this movie has been tagged as a historical fiction, which simply means that although it was set in a real place, which is Oyo State in Nigeria, the details and the action of this movie are a mix of both actual events and the ones from the producer's imagination. So before we start criticizing and saying all sorts, we should all try to put this in mind that it's just a movie at the end of the day, right? And in my own opinion, I feel like movies are meant to be enjoyed, not overly criticized. Just enjoy it, right? Now, these are my thoughts about the movie. So for the starting point, I loved how the movie started. So it started with a strange bird, a mystical bird, coming to raise Saro back to life. I personally feel that was a catchy scene, right? They grabbed the viewer's attention with that first scene, so I loved it. Now, the next thing I loved about this movie is how the characters grew on us, right? If you've watched this movie, you see that with each passing scene, the characters actually, progressed, their role progressed with the movie, so I loved that. Then the next thing I loved about this movie is the use of colors. The way they use colors, it was great. I loved the camera techniques, I loved the scenery was giving, I loved the mood, I loved the makeup, I loved the costumes, right? Their costumes were giving, everything was on point. I loved the local way they prepared food. I loved that they paid so much attention to details, right? Now, if you've watched this movie, you'll see that Saro had tribal marks on his cheeks, right? Although he was not the only one that had tribal marks, but that's the attention to details that I'm talking about. They paid so much attention to details, right? If you look closely to Kunle Remi's face, you won't even know that those tribal marks were, fake, right? So the tribal marks were on point, so I also loved that. Then I loved their hairstyles, like their hairstyles were given, so I loved that they paid so much attention to details. The next thing I also loved about this movie is the line of work. I love the fact that they showed us how to make ceramics, basically. So Awanru was a ceramic maker, and I love the fact that even though they gave us snippets, right, I love the fact that they showed us how it is being done, right? Then I also love the fact that they added the ashofi making process. I love the fact that they showed us, a little snippet of how ashofi was made in the movie. Another thing I loved about this movie is the fact that they had a community of people who genuinely cared and had each other's back. An example of what I'm saying is when when Saru newly got into the village and he was offered food and a job by Anwuru. I found that to be, overly nice, right? That was not overly, but that was a really nice gesture. I loved that they added that part to the movie. Personally, I feel like the director and the overall cast, they killed their role, right? They killed their role and they gave us an almost perfect movie. But at the end of the day, it's a movie and it can't be perfect. So here are some of the things that I didn't like about the movie. So the first thing I didn't like about the movie was the fact that it was translated to English on Netflix, right? Personally, I feel like it should have been left as a Yoruba film but subtitled in English, because there are so many Korean movies that are not even translated in English, right? They speak Korean language but they give us subtitles in English. So I felt like they should have done the same thing with this movie, not translating it to English, because if you watched it from Netflix, you could see that these people were speaking Yoruba, but what we were hearing was English. So I personally feel like they should have left it as a Yoruba speaking film but subtitled in English. The next thing I didn't like about this movie is the fact that they portrayed Sola Sobowale to be just an ordinary sugar mommy, right? I feel like her character didn't really grow, right? Like after the whole sugar mommy vibe, she helped him get a house, get a job, and just basically set him up in the land. But at the end of the day, he left with the king's wife and she didn't do anything about it. So I didn't like the fact that her character didn't really grow. Like it just died. So I didn't like that fact. Then the next thing I didn't like about the movie was the fact that the Akala bed, that's a mystical bed that had the power to bring back the dead to life, right? They didn't give us an in-depth detail about the bed. Like the bed is supposed to have an origin, where it came from. Like I feel like aside raising the dead back to life, there are other things that that bed could have done, right? So they should have given us an in-depth detail of that bed. They shouldn't have just allowed the bed to be just an ordinary bed that could just raise people back to life, right? So that's another thing I didn't like about the movie. Then the next thing I didn't like about the movie was the fact that when Arolake wanted to leave, she poured out the Akala power. Like she wasted it. Like sis, why waste such power? Because at the end of the day, right, she was the one that found the power and gave it to Saru, that foolish man. I'm sorry to say, but he was foolish. So she was the one that found the power. So when she wanted to leave, I feel like she shouldn't have just poured and wasted such a power. She should have gone with it. It's her own. She would have done a lot of things with that power, right? Like it didn't make any sense. Like I know it's just a movie, I shouldn't be getting this angry, but that scene was stupid. It was stupid of what's her name, Queen Arolake. It was very foolish. It was a foolish thing to do, and I feel like she shouldn't have done that. She shouldn't have done that. Now the next thing I didn't like about this movie is the fact that Queen Arolake picked up Akala's power and left with it, and there were no consequences, right? They didn't show us that anything happened to Arolake. Like at the end of the day, come on, this is Nigeria and the tribe they're trying to portray is Yoruba. For goodness sakes, we all know that's a spiritual power. It's a mystical power, right? You can't just take it and leave and nothing will happen to you. So I feel like something should have happened to Arolake, right? Something should have happened to her. That's personally what I feel and I didn't like. Now the next thing I didn't like about this movie is the fact that the king only spoke through a mouthpiece, right? Okay, why is the king not talking? Is he dumb? Did he have any sickness that led to him not talking? Like they should have giving us reasons why the king was not speaking, right? Okay, if he could talk, why was he going through a mouthpiece? So there was no detail about that. So that's another thing I didn't like about the movie. The next thing I didn't like about this movie is the first night they spent with each other. See, let me just put this out there. That was rape. That was rape, right? Now let me explain this to you if you haven't watched the movie, right? So after Saro left the palace, because he went to the palace to make dresses for the king's wives and his children, right? Now when he left the palace, he was heading to his house, and it was midnight, right? And he was going through a bush path, right? Everywhere was dark, and suddenly Queen Arolake came out of the dark and just climbed or jumped on Saro. There was no consent. There was no consent at the end of the day. So that was rape, but nobody is saying anything about it. So I didn't like the fact that they just casually made it look like, oh, it's just sex now. Saro is a man, he should enjoy it, it's sex. That was rape because there was no consent from Saro. Now the next and the final thing that I didn't like about the movie is the fact that they added nude scenes, right? Now let me explain this to you. It's not like I didn't like it, but I feel like the nude scenes were not necessary. But I understand why they added it, right? They added it because they knew it was going to grab the viewers' attention, and it did at the end of the day, because a lot of people that watch that movie, they watch it because they saw nude scenes on the trailer. So right, I get that part, but I personally feel it wasn't necessary, right? Personally, I feel like you should watch this movie, right? It was a great movie. It was really nice and enjoyable. It's like a feel-good movie. So if you're looking for a movie that can help you relax, right, I feel like you should watch ANIKULAPO. It was nice. It was great. I've been repeating myself, but it was great. If I were to rate it, I would give this movie a 7.5 over 10, because at the end of the day, it's a movie and it's not perfect. So yeah, 7.5 over 10. That's what I would rate this movie. I'd highly recommend that you watch this movie, right? It's not as bad as people are making it look. It's not even a bad movie. It was nice, right? Everything was on point. So yeah, that's the end of my review. Now if you enjoyed this video, hit the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up if you'd like to see more videos like this. Don't forget to comment, share this video with your family and friends, and yeah, I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye bye.
I wanna make we day.